All right, I'm going to cover a little bit of sexism and a little bit of racism in this video, as well as, well, some of the comments I've had to go through. Um, I'm trying to get this to show up with the video that I'm making now. There it is. It's called Why All the Balls Are in a Woman's Court. There's reasons why it's difficult for a man to want to date this day and age. Most of the women that we know are not interested in a guy who's not good looking. I've noticed that the difference between men and women is very little, but we're taught that there is a greater divide than there really is. We are taught that men are brain damaged and that's why they're emotionally stunted. No, we're trained that we're not allowed to show certain emotions. We're trained that we'll get in trouble if somebody just assumes wrong things about us. Now, there are a great many men and a great many women who speak out about how superficial our society is, especially with superficial women. Why is that we have women speaking out about that? Well, because of hypocrisy. We've got a lot of women in America who are on drugs. A lot of them. And they don't necessarily make good decisions when they're on drugs, just like the men who are on drugs. There's a lot of women out there who complain about dating and how easy it is for a man. What man? You mean a good-looking man who has lots of money and a nice house and inherited a bunch of money from his daddy? You think there's one of them out there for every woman out there? You know, for every guy that you guys throw yourselves at shamelessly, there's at least 10 dudes that you're ignoring altogether. 10 guys that might be decent dudes, but you automatically treat them like a creep because they're not rich. Then for a man, he's got to really put himself out there a lot more than a woman has to, because it is expected by our society that a man should ask a woman out. There are lots of women that I asked out that said no. Lots of them. Now, did I pursue any of those women after they said no? No, I did not. And that's the problem with all of this. People keep pretending like the situation between me and Natalie that I continue to be abused over to this day. They keep trying to pretend it's something where I couldn't take no for an answer. No, I'm great at taking no for an answer. I'm not okay with taking a shit ton of abuse for things that I didn't do. I'm not okay for taking abuse for things that you asked me to do. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with multiple people harassing me and threatening me and assaulting me and threatening to harm my friends and family. I'm not okay with that. Are all the balls literally in a woman's court? No. Every person in America has a different level of what is considered acceptable human. See, our society is based almost entirely on bias. You know what you were taught, but just because you were taught something doesn't mean it's the truth. There were a lot of people for a lot of years in the United States who thought that slavery was okay because it was legal. Hell no, it's not okay. And it's still legal. Look up the 13th Amendment to the Constitution and read it. When it comes to driving, women get pulled over just as often as men. but men are 6 times more likely to get a ticket. Those tickets cost money. So every time that a woman gets off simply because she's a woman, she gets to save money just because of her gender. I'm told how the average man earns between $3,000 and $4,000 more than the average woman. Now, you know who's included in that? Extremes. And that's what we're dealing with. When it comes to the men who are making us all look bad, or so the saying is, we're talking about extreme examples. When we talk about the extreme examples of rich men versus rich women, we're talking about trillions of dollars in difference just in the United States. You want to put those figures into it? Yeah, sure, you're right. But as soon as you start taking the extremes out of there, you notice it's a lot closer. One of these websites, though, this is an extreme hate group that hates men, thinks that there's no use for men and men should all be castrated and stuff like this. They claimed that a man on average in the United States makes $10,000 to $12,000 more per year than a woman. Meanwhile, I'm not one of those men. I make Now we did the actual math on it down to the dollars and cents, and it was like $9,500 a year. There is a bigger difference between what they claim that a man makes per year and a woman makes per year. There is a bigger difference between those two than I make in an entire year. And I'm told how unfair it is that women get paid less than men. Meanwhile, I'm not one of those men. I'm not one of those good looking men that has 100 women throwing themselves at him every single day, who gets to pick and choose out of all these women which one he's going to be with. That's just not how it is for me. When it came to Natalie Bollinger, all the balls were in her court. She had people who were threatening to kill me and threatening to kill my family and calling me up and harassing me on the internet. And I just wanted it to stop. Now, the internet stuff wasn't the biggest issue. The biggest issue was people in real life harming me over things that I did not do, or things that I was asked to do by Natalie Bollinger or Alicia Bollinger. And then later on, they tried to pretend that I was stalking them because I did what they asked. It's horrible. And society is expected to believe them, especially because they're pretty, especially because they're female, especially because they are white. If Gabby Petito had been a black woman, would there have been as much coverage as there was? If she had been a Native American woman, would there be as much coverage as there was? Of course there wouldn't. If she was a male, for surely there wouldn't be. We get all this stuff shoved down our throats that's just racist propaganda, and we get sexist propaganda that is exactly the same. It's propaganda, but people spout it as if it's truth because it's a common opinion. It's a common opinion because you guys are told what opinions to have by the media, and you eat that shit up like it's candy. When I say that the balls are all in a woman's court, it's because women truly have more power than they let on to believe. A woman can have you incarcerated over her paranoia. With a man, you can have overwhelming evidence against a woman. If she's a pretty white girl, it doesn't matter. Nobody wants to look at it. They want to assume your guilt. They want someone to punish. They want someone to take their shitty lives out on. Many of these people who harassed me from these web sleuth groups are alcoholics and drug addicts. This is their special interest. And Natalie Bollinger and her family and all of the things that they did before Natalie was killed, they were compounded exponentially after she was killed. Her family was hyping up and psyching up all sorts of people to do horrible shit. And they did do horrible shit repeatedly, over and over again. I was trying to get help stopping the predators like Tim Beeson. Tim Beeson had no right to threaten my life. You have any idea how much shit that Natalie and her friends put me through before I finally had a fucking mental breakdown from all of the abuse? I had that mental breakdown well before Natalie was killed, and it continued because the abuse continued. When I asked for help, I got ignored. When I screamed for help, I got more abuse. See, that's specifically from people who are supposedly my friends. I was taking abuse from these other predators in Natalie's life, regardless of what my friends did. But my so called friends ignored me when I asked them nicely for help. When I went to them for help, they just wanted to talk over me and tell me how to think and tell me how to feel. And none of them took the time to listen to what I was saying until it was too late to do anything about it. Then I get treated like I'm some sort of a monster. Now, Tim Beeson wasn't just threatening me and harassing me on the internet and over the phone. He was also helping Natalie to get court stuff against me. Why was there any court stuff going on with that at all? Why was I denied those rights, but Natalie wasn't? Why was Tim Beeson allowed to threaten my life? But I wasn't allowed to ask for help. I wasn't allowed to show evidence or turn in my predators. How come my predators were allowed to deny me the right to go to court and harm me repeatedly because I was not allowed to go to court? I was illegally prevented from going to court, illegally prevented from facing my accusers, illegally prevented from showing evidence. But I'd also been speaking out for a long time. See, before Natalie, I spoke out about police corruption in Boulder, Colorado, and here in Chapel, Nebraska. I've got multiple witnesses to the abuse that many of us have experienced at the hands of law enforcement. A lot of people treat me horribly because I speak out. But I take abuse whether I speak out or not. At least if I speak out, there is a small chance that something will change. Whereas if I keep my mouth shut, nothing will change. I speak out in the minuscule hope that it might make a difference. Between taking this abuse for the rest of my life just because I didn't speak up and taking this abuse for the rest of my life knowing I at least tried to get heard. At least I tried. When it comes to family courts, women do have the advantage. When it comes to police, women are more likely to abuse a male by a lot, but the male is more likely to get arrested and hauled in. Police officers often ignore the situation that the male is bringing to them, assuming that the woman is right. If she beats on a man for 20 minutes in public, it's amazing when the cops show up how many people are like, well, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. You were staring right at it, motherfucker. I was at a street dance once where a woman was beating on her husband, just throwing shit and screaming at the top of her lungs. She was drunk off her ass. And she assaulted him for a good long while. She never got in any trouble for it. None. And he never hit her back. There's another situation where I was at a guy's house and his girlfriend kept on hitting him over and over and over again. Over and over and over. She gave him a bloody nose. She did it because she was mean. All right. If I explained to you the whole situation, you'd understand how mean she is. But the point is that he wanted her out of his house. He wanted her to stop throwing stuff at him and stop hitting him. So he opened up the door and she was walking up to him and up in his face and screaming at him and slapping him in the face. And she even kicked him in the balls. And when she kicked him in the balls, he said, "That's it. You need to get the fuck out of my house." And he pushed her in the shoulder, not shoved, but pushed her out the door, closed the door, and locked it. Well, here's the thing. That right there could have resulted in him getting into a lot of trouble, and she got into absolutely none. Later on, there was another situation with this woman where she was drunk and had a bunch of kids with her, and she should not have been in the vehicle, and so on and so forth. And he ended up getting in trouble. She was the one who was in trouble, but she wanted to project it onto him. Now, although I was there for the situation, it didn't matter. I was never asked to show up in court. I was never subpoenaed. I was never talked to by the officers. And this guy had to go through a lot of stuff as a result of that. He had to go through classes that he had to pay for. He had to go through a lot of stuff. They dropped the charges against her, but would not drop the charges against him. Meanwhile, she was guilty and he was not. All he was doing was trying to guarantee his safety. And the worst part is, he couldn't call the cops because he had to be afraid that he would be the one arrested. Michaela, small town babe, typed hello. Hello, Michaela. You wouldn't happen to be from Beatrice, Nebraska, would you? Sorry, Michaela is somebody over in the chat on the side that's saying hello. We live in a pretty messed up world. Now, I'm not saying that everything that happens in life is a woman's fault because that's absolutely not true. There's a lot of stuff that I say that can be construed as sexist or racist. And in those situations, it's not that I'm being sexist or racist, it's that I'm being an equalitarian. When I get a whole bunch of stuff across my Facebook or across my YouTube channel talking about how horrible men are, I'll take the things that were said about men and I'll say them about women. If there's a bunch of stuff talking about how horrible women are, well, I'll change the word around to the other one. Michaela, small town babe, typed, who are you talking to? I'm talking to anybody who will listen, Miss Michaela. Let's see, it says, I'm going to read all of what Michaela's written actually. She typed hello and then hi. Wow, you said hi this time. Yay. I think you were very awesome. Who are you talking to? Well, obviously, I'm talking to you right now, Miss Michaela. Michaela, small town babe, typed, I want to. You want to what? It might take a minute for her to respond. Ah, listen. That works. Now, there's a lot of stuff that we have to deal with that's a bias. It's not necessarily true. I've gotten to hear my whole life how Native Americans are all a bunch of alcoholics. Now, that's not true. They're not all a bunch of alcoholics. But that's the stigma that they have in the United States. When it comes to the homeless, we hear the same thing. All growing up, I got to hear about how Mexicans are all thieves and they're all going to steal your stuff. It's not true. Not all Mexicans are thieves. Not all Mexicans want to steal your stuff. But we get to hear that about the homeless, and it's magically okay. I got to hear about how all Jews want is to take your money, and that's just not true. There are plenty of Jewish people out there who are not interested in your money. But that's what I get to hear about the homeless. All of these bias that there are against minorities, all of these bias are things that the homeless have to deal with. I got to hear growing up about how all black people are rapists. We got Donald Trump pretending like anybody who comes up from south of the border is a rapist. And people look at the homeless as if the homeless are all rapists, as if they're all murderers, as if they're all child molesters, as if they're all lazy, as if they all drive a convertible. All of you have heard these stories about the convertibles. How homeless people aren't really homeless. There's a guy who's driving around in a BMW flying a sign. He makes $180,000 a year. Meanwhile, I knew a guy who had a BMW who was homeless. It was not a convertible like you always hear about in the stories. The other thing is, that was his only possession. Sure, he had little knickknacks in there. He had his sleeping bag. Obviously he doesn't want to freeze to death. He's got a blanket, but that vehicle was what he had. He worked hard for that vehicle. He thought that in the position that he was in, that he was going to make a lot of money and he was going to be at that car dealership. I believe it was a car dealership. It might have been auto detailing, but he was able to afford a BMW before he ended up homeless. When he ended up homeless, his vehicle was the only thing that he had paid off. So he lived in his BMW. But again, it was not a convertible. When we look at all of the services there are for women, let's look at Boulder County, for example. There are 14 women's services for every co-ed service. Do you know what that means? For every service that serves both men and women, there are 14 organizations or programs that exclusively only help women. There are hundreds of battered women's shelters in the United States. There used to be a lot more, but then we ended up with police departments taking over for those, and most of them ended up closed. They figured that the money that was going to battered women's shelters would be better used to build more prisons, build more jails, build more cells, and obviously incarcerate more people. Michaela Smalltown Babe wrote, I came from, I think, Rob Gavigan's video. I think you are misunderstood and might need a friend. I absolutely do need a friend, Miss Michaela. I need people to fight for my rights. I need for people to actually start showing this evidence. I've shown plenty of it, but people mainly just want to talk about it. They don't want to actually do anything. They'll talk about how horrible it is, but they won't actually do anything. And no, Miss Michaela, that's not you in specific, of course. Now, let's get back to the balls being in a woman's court. When Natalie Bollinger was embarrassed in Virginia, after pity partying me to go to Virginia, I did promise that I would go see her in Virginia. So it's not like she was completely off base. She was having a hard time. She was struggling. I was the only person that she felt that she could talk to this stuff, talk with it about this stuff. And, that's something that it was real difficult for me because at that point in time, I was having a lot of difficulties of my own. I was 2 months late getting to Virginia, and she called me up one night. I was over at Dennis and Brenda Dickinson's house. That's where I was staying at the time. Natalie said if I wasn't already on the road to Virginia, she was going to kill herself. And then she ran her vehicle into a telephone pole within a couple hours of that, trying to kill herself because I wasn't already on the way. So I made sure that I went there. We did what Natalie wanted to do. We did what her sister wanted to do. Her sister wanted me to stay behind the store that she worked at. Her name is Alicia Bollinger. She is Natalie's twin sister. Now, Alicia Bollinger, she's the one who asked me to stay behind the cricket store. Now, Natalie used to work there before she got into a car accident. But as I mentioned, I didn't show up there until after she had tried to kill herself in that car accident. Natalie didn't work there anymore. She misled as much of the situation as she could and cried wolf and didn't care that I was the one being harmed for it. She didn't care that an innocent man was being harmed because she was embarrassed and couldn't tell the truth because she was embarrassed. And Tim Beeson, while he's getting a hold of me and threatening my friends and family and accusing me of being a child molester and a druggie and all this other shit, he's not telling Natalie that he's doing this stuff. He's telling Natalie to ignore me and that he'll take care of it and so on and so forth. And then this guy who I was trying to get help from Natalie stopping people like Tim Beeson from doing this shit. He helped her to try to frame me as a stalker. This guy was literally stalking me, literally threatening to kill me, literally threatening to kill my friends and my family. And then he goes into the police station and wants to pretend like he and Natalie are the victims. Well, excuse me. No, the fuck you're not. I wasn't threatening to kill anyone. I didn't threaten to kill Tim Beeson. I didn't threaten to kill Natalie Bollinger. I didn't threaten to kill Alicia Bollinger. I didn't threaten to kill anyone in their family. But lo and behold, that's what they wanted to pretend. And that's what I was being abused over. Not things that actually happened, but people with paranoid minds who did too many drugs, who wanted to pretend that they were victims for sympathy. I couldn't get the cops to help. I couldn't get my friends to help. And the closest that I got to almost help was not the kind of help that I wanted. There was a woman named Joanna Taylor Smith. And I don't know who she's with now, but she used to date Derek Parrish. And before Natalie was killed, I was trying to get help from Joanna. And the problem with Joanna and her brand of help, she knew that I was suicidal over the abuse that I was taking. She knew that I was being abused. She knew that it was the result of Maddie Boa, Natalie Bollinger, and Alicia Bollinger. I didn't want Natalie Bollinger being blamed for my death. I didn't want Natalie Bollinger to have to go through a bunch of crap if I was killed. The problem is that Joanna Taylor Smith basically said that she would make Natalie, Alicia, and Maddie's life hell if I killed myself, and I didn't want that. That made things so difficult because I didn't want Natalie, Alicia, and Maddie to be psychologically tortured the way that I was being tortured. And I was being tortured over Natalie Bollinger, Maddie Boa, and Alicia Bollinger. I didn't want my predators to be harmed. People say, well, you pushed her to the point of suicide. Well, according to the police reports, it wasn't me. It was her ex-boyfriend. Or sorry, her boyfriends. She had more than one at the time that she died. She cited family problems and problems with her boyfriend as the reason that she committed suicide. She had Joseph Michael Lopez shoot her in the head. And yes, she did specifically speak out about her family and specifically about her boyfriend, Joey Moreno. and about how they were the reasons that she was trying to kill herself. Then there's the evidence from her grandma. Her grandma wanted to go to town against one of Natalie's ex stepmothers, Miss Shelley, because Miss Shelley was trying to have Miss Natalie put in prison. I wonder why Miss Shelley was trying to have Miss Natalie put in prison. I know I wanted Natalie put in prison. Either tell the truth or you belong there. Innocent people are being harmed over your bullshit, Miss Natalie. And that was my whole point. When Tim Beeson got a hold of me and started threatening my friends and my family, yes, I got a hold of Natalie Bollinger to let her know what was going on and try to get her to call off the dogs. And that's specifically what I wrote to her. Call off the dogs. She threatened to call the cops on me. I gave her my phone number and told her to give my number to the cops and have them call me, and they never did. It's not that I wasn't trying to get help, it's that I was being completely fucking ignored, being talked over, or being beat down. The reason that people got the wrong opinion was because only one side was allowed to be shown. Meanwhile, there's a lot of disabilities I got to deal with. And not all of those disabilities are physical or mental disabilities. Some of them just come down to the fact that I'm no good with electronics. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos that I would love to post if I could just figure out how to bleep out a few specific parts, not because I believe in censorship, but because if certain people's phone numbers or social security numbers or things like that are up on YouTube, I'll get a YouTube ban. And I don't want that. Now, if I could figure out how to bleep just out those specific parts, yeah, there'd be a lot more up here. A lot more evidence that shows that I've been telling the truth. Now, this person, Michaela Smalltown Babe, came from Rob Gavigan's video. Rob Gavigan did the same thing as everyone else. They don't bother getting a hold of me. I'm willing to talk to them, but they don't bother getting a hold of me. So then they make a video. I find out about these videos because there's a lot of them made every year. And I can usually tell when somebody makes a new video because I'll get a new influx of people hitting up my Facebook and hitting up my YouTube and threatening to kill me and my family, accusing me of being a bunch of fucking creepy shit that I'm not, over and over and over again. Rob Gavigan was no different. I tried sending him evidence, but, well, he never got back a hold of me. He claimed that he was gonna, but he didn't. He claimed he was looking at the evidence, or was gonna look at the evidence, but he didn't. He told me he'd let me know when he was done looking at it, and that way I could send him some more because I have a lot. And I didn't hardly send him anything because, well, here's the thing about hardly anything for the amount of evidence that I've collected. I've got probably close to 1,000 conversations with witnesses recorded. I've got at least 10,000 screenshots. I mean, that alone right there, if I sent 100 videos and 1,000 screenshots, I've barely scratched the surface. Now, I didn't use pretty words. A lot of people are mad at me because I cursed. I tried being nice to begin with. I started off being nice about the situation, but people were literally assaulting me. I had to deal with a lot of people cursing at me, and nobody seemed to have any issue with that. Nobody seemed to have any issue with people actually threatening to kill me. When Natalie died, guess how many times I'd threatened to kill her? 0 times. Guess how many times I had threatened to harm anyone in her family? 0 times. 0. But this situation goes to show that, yes, the ball is in the women's court. Natalie Bollinger not only destroyed my life with what she thought was a little white lie. She thought, well, this little white lie isn't really going to hurt anybody. He's homeless. He's going to leave. It'll be all done and over with. No big deal. And then I won't get in as much trouble for the drugs that I'm doing. And I'm sure that something very similar to that was going through her fucking head. When I left there, that should have been the end of it. But I didn't even make it out of the state of Virginia in 2016 before I had to deal with the consequences of Natalie Bollinger lying and Alicia Bollinger lying. They got a hold of Maddie Boa, and they claimed that I had threatened them and their family. So Maddie Boa spread that rumor through Boulder. And then those people in Boulder, one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I'm being assaulted for shit that never fucking happened. And trying to get somebody to actually help. See, here's the thing. Natalie asked for help because she was crying wolf and wanted sympathy, and all sorts of fucking people helped her. When I asked for help, I got I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get involved. From people who were already involved. And then there were people who offered to help before Natalie was killed. Obviously, they're involved. Obviously, they knew something was up. But after Natalie was killed, many of them were intimidated by internet fucking wingnuts. You guys say I should be all right with all this on the internet. Well, you know what? If these other people are scared fucking shitless because they're being harassed just for helping, just for speaking up about who I am. And a lot of people did that when Natalie first disappeared. A lot of people spoke up, but they only did so on Facebook. They didn't speak up in court where it actually mattered. They didn't go in with me to guarantee that my rights were observed. Meanwhile, I had the things that I was forced to do to try to get the police to do their goddamn job because it was just me. Everybody else who said that they were going to ended up just being pretty fucking words. When Natalie asked for Tim's help, did she have to wait 7 months for him to go in and make a police report with her? When I needed somebody to go in with me to get a protection order against these people before Natalie was killed, everybody made the same excuses that they always give men, especially when they call those men mentally ill. And even more especially when those men are homeless. And I've had to deal with that ever since. The police wouldn't do their job, so I had to rely and depend on and trust a bunch of goddamn web junkies who are infatuated with death, who work together with the Bollinger family to have this ginormous goddamn clusterfuck of mental fucking abuse while pretending to be my friend and then trash talking me in a whole bunch of different websites and making false claims in these websites, pretending that they were things that they weren't, like autism advocates. And these people are friends with the Bollingers who are pretending that they're going to help me. In reality, they just wanted someone to project their sins onto. Natalie admitted that we never dated. Meanwhile, one of these web sleuths, the one who claimed to be an autism advocate, who was friends with Rochelle Shelley Campbell, this woman outright lied, claimed that I had dated Natalie Bollinger, that Natalie Bollinger was my ex-girlfriend, and this was allowed in my court dates. Natalie's own words on the subject were not. Natalie admitted that we never dated. We never had that kind of a relationship. Matter of fact, she even typed the word ew when people were making that suggestion on her fucking Facebook. Why'd you date him? Were you dating him? Oh no, ew, that's gross. Yeah. But meanwhile, if you look at the messages between us, on our messenger. You realize that she mentions at least 3 or 4 times that she thought she was in love with me. She told me she loved me every single day. And there's a big difference between loving someone and being in love with someone. I absolutely loved Natalie, but I don't fall in love with anyone. I love my older brother. I'm not in love with him. But then you want to pretend that any time that a man defends himself, that he's an abusive and toxic masculinity type of dude. Fuck no. How much abuse is a man expected to take? The courts favor women. The police favor women. It's been shown repeatedly that, well, most of the victims, over 70% of victims of domestic abuse, are males. And then there's a lot of statistics that aren't counted. How many times have you seen women beat on men and get away with it? A lot. Most abuse by women towards men goes unreported because of stigmatisms. Most sexual assaults against boys go unreported because of stigmatisms. If a boy is raped, he's treated like he is no longer masculine, like he cannot be a man. If a woman says it, if she's a pretty, young, white girl, we are expected to drop everything. When you see a man struggling to put something heavy in his vehicle, do you offer to help or is that just for women? Do you open the door for everyone or is that just for women? Do you assume that every victim is a woman? Do you assume that every predator is a man? We can see on the nightly news that that is not true. Almost every night now, you get on the nightly news and there's a female teacher who's knocked up with some underage student's kid. And they're, on average, going to get probation. Whereas a man is looking at average 16 years. Is that true? Not anymore. Now there are even heavier penalties, much heavier penalties, but the penalties for women are almost non existent. We tend to give women a slap on the wrist, or when a woman is predatory, we tend to arrest their victim. And then those statistics go to making a man look horrible because he has a penis. Meanwhile, almost all of us have known that one guy who is a good looking asshole. He is seriously an asshole. You already know several women that this asshole is beating the fuck out of. You've already helped several women move away from this jackass. And then when you tell your friend who is finding him attractive and swooning over him, hey, he beats on women. All right. I've rescued a couple of women. Oh, you just don't like him because he likes me and you're jealous. No, it's not a jealousy thing. The dude beats on women. And then you're not her friend anymore. She already knows his reputation, but she wants to assume that you don't know what's going on, that you weren't there for the things that you were there for. And now she's going out with this good looking dude, and she's doing what those other women did. As soon as he starts beating on her, she starts complaining. But she doesn't complain about him in specific. She complains about how horrible men are. There are not a whole bunch of people who are the top 1% of good looking. Now, I've noticed that the guys who are the top 1% of good looking have all sorts of men throwing, or all sorts of women throwing themselves at him. He's got his pick. He can abuse the shit out of you because in his mind, he can get away with it because he can throw you away and get another one. If you're pretty enough, he might keep you around and still go get another one, or two, or three, or five, or more. And it's not just pretty men who are like this. You can see that pretty women tend to be the same. Does that mean that all good looking men are like that? No. Does it mean that all good looking women are like that? No. Women get the benefit of the doubt because society says that we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then we deny men an honest day in court simply because they have the wrong genitalia to fit the bias and assumptions of the American public. These people knew that they couldn't get me in court because I was the victim. So they made me a target for the American public. And then these web sleuth groups made me a target for the entire world. Now, some of you are going to try to argue stupid shit and say, oh, well, there's places in Africa that have never heard of you. Well, that's fine. That's fine. But the internet is worldwide. These web sleuth groups are in multiple languages. Meanwhile, I'm not allowed to show my side to this day. Rob Gavigan isn't going to try showing my side. Mike Boudet never tried showing my side. He slandered the shit out of me, and then he got back a hold of me after slandering the shit out of me, and then he wanted to pretend like he wanted my story. That's because Natalie's story was one of his biggest hits. It was a big issue. Him and the guy that worked for him named Josh, committed quite a few felonies. But it's all okay because these guys called me mentally ill and loosely associated it as schizophrenic. Now, I went and saw a psychologist day before yesterday because it's 1:16 a.m. on the 20th. I saw the psychologist on my birthday, which is the 18th. And guess what? She says I'm not schizophrenic. So these people and all of their excuses all go out the window because all of these people wanted to use the term mentally ill to loosely claim that I was schizophrenic and use that as an excuse to deny me all of my rights. Now, being as it's not true, we got a whole different ball game going on. But I need help, actual help, not pretty words on Facebook, not pretty words on YouTube. I need actual help. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars for help from people who should have told me that they were alcoholics before I went there. From people who should have told me that they were strung out on meth before I went there. Before I invested my time and my energy and my money to go there, they should have told me these things. If I'd have known Shannon Alvarado was as bad of an alcoholic as she was, I wouldn't have taken her invitation to go to California. If I'd have known that Brett Roloff was strung out on methamphetamines, I never would have gone to Bristol, Virginia. Once you're in that situation and you spend everything that you have to get there in a last ditch effort and hope, once you get there, you've got nothing left. So you're stuck there, you're stranded. You can't go anywhere. Where are you going to go? A lot of people want to make all sorts of stupid claims. I'm going to read one from a guy who typed on here earlier. We'll read what this guy typed, and then I'll read what I replied to him. He typed, he calls himself Fred Turner. And this is on a video called How I Am Treated and How I Treat Others Back. He typed, here is a lot of evidence against you in Natalie's case. Now, mind you, he doesn't post up any evidence, but he says, here is a lot of evidence against you in Natalie's case. Some are your own Facebook messages to her as you wanted to blow your B out in front of her. Then you wanted her to suffer as much as you did. You weren't all the victim there, bud. No, I was the victim. I was begging for death, my own, not anyone else's. Because of the abuse that I had to deal with, because of Natalie Bollinger and her friends who were relentless in their bullshit. You damn right I wanted to blow my brains out in front of her. She could have put a stop to this at any point in time by simply telling the truth. And guess what? I've been able to show the truth since she died, but not in a court of law, not on the media, not in these groups, not in any of these Rob Gavigan channels or Mike Boudet channels or any of the other supposed web sleuth channels that have supposed Natalie Bollinger justice groups. Most of them are Sean Schwartz hate groups to begin with, by the way. Most of them today are still Sean Schwartz hate groups because they sell the same narrative as the original ones. They're not saying nothing new. They're making the same mistakes and they're regurgitating the same bullshit. So what Fred Turner typed here is a lot of evidence against you in Natalie's case. Some are your own Facebook messages to her as you wanted to blow your B out right in front of her. Then you wanted her to suffer as much as you did. You weren't all the victim there, bud. No one speaks out because there is no crime, just hurt feelings. You're the boy who cried wolf. Here's the thing. I am actually dealing with actual abuse because Natalie Bollinger cried wolf. And Alicia Bollinger cried wolf. And then when their family got busted lying and fucking around with these web sleuth nut jobs, pulling fucked up head games, then they cried wolf. And I had to do some desperate shit to try to force the cops to do their job. I literally had to break the law to get a day in court, and then I was denied my day in court. I needed to get Alicia Bollinger in court. I needed to get Ted Bollinger in court. I needed to get Tim Beeson in court. And Rochelle Shelley Campbell in court. As well as her friend Kara Johnson Miles in court. But because the cops wouldn't do a goddamn thing because I'm a male, and my so-called supposed friends wouldn't go in with me because they wanted to give me the male treatment. Oh, it'll blow over. Oh, you just need to man up. Oh, don't worry about it. It'll eventually blow over. Oh, time heals all. Yeah, time is not healing my anything. It's making things worse. The fact that these people didn't come forward about crimes that they were aware were happening to me shows how horrible excuses for human beings they are. How can they call themselves my friends when they do that? When they knew that this was going on and they didn't come forward. And then they wanted to play victim when I recorded conversations with them where they admitted the things that I was saying were true. And then they wanted to play victim. They wanted to play like I was a terrible person for recording those conversations and showing the truth in the only place that I could. And even then, I have to watch what I put up on Facebook or YouTube. Why? Because I can't put up all of the evidence or I will get banned from Facebook and YouTube. I got multiple 30-day bans from YouTube or from Facebook, sorry, for posting up screenshots of people who are threatening to kill me. Not the pictures of themselves, but screenshots of the threats themselves. Meanwhile, these folks are allowed to post that stuff up in these YouTube groups and Facebook groups. It's okay for them to do it. It's wrong for me to do it back. You know, I started asking people to shoot me in the head over a year before Natalie was killed. Over a year. And I told everyone, please help me or kill me. Help me or kill me. But they didn't want to help me. They didn't want to even listen. They would tell me that they were my friends and then talk over me. If they were really my friends, they would have tried to find out what was going on. Now, from the years and years and years that I spent helping others, you know what I noticed? People know their situations better than I do. So they know what help they need more than I do. When people asked for my help, they got the help that they asked for. When I asked for help, people wanted to argue with me. They didn't want to find out the situation. They wanted to assume that their bias and their assumptions were right. And as a result, what I had to say did not matter. When people have already decided that saying a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush is going to fix your problems, they're not going to hear anything more on it. They're not going to hear anything more that you have to say. Meanwhile, if you were trying to get someone to speak out about a situation that they were literally there for, where you were assaulted, and them speaking up could prevent future assaults by these assailants, it's pretty important for them to speak up, isn't it? When they don't, when you are being abused because they never came forward, when you've spent all of your resources doing what it is that they asked you to do because they promised to come forward if you did, and then they never come forward, and you're out of those resources and you're out of time because of the statute of limitations, and you wish you could have that time back, you wish you could have that money back, because now you don't have either one. You wasted them on people's empty promises. A man can go to prison over a woman's opinion. If a man just looks your direction while you're wearing something skimpy because you want a particular good looking man to approach you, and it turns out that, well, some of the men that are attracted to you aren't the good looking ones. There's also a fat, ugly dude with no teeth who also thinks that you're attractive. There's some young punk who's probably still in high school. Maybe he just graduated. He's riding around on his longboard. He's kind of a hipster. You don't want him because he's got pimples all over his face, but he still looks at you. And then you want to pretend that it's the end of the world because some creeper was staring at you. Whereas if he was a good looking guy, if Jason Momoa was blatantly gawking at you when you dressed like that, you're not going to treat Jason Momoa the same as you are that fat old man with no teeth. You're not going to treat Jason Momoa the same way that you treat that little border with pimples all over his face. I'm going to tell you something. I used to have a pretty decent six pack. I was never muscle bound. I was never super good looking. But I did notice that if I walked around with no shirt on, when women did come and approach me and talk to me, it was usually when I had no shirt on, and they were usually staring at my abs. And that's okay. Society says that's okay. Whereas if I blatantly gawk at her boobs, well, I must be some sort of a sick pervert, right? I've even had women say, you're ugly in the face, but you got a good body. And of course, that was years ago. I mean, I'm 41 now. I'm not young and pretty. I was never pretty, but I was young once. When they locked me up back in January, I still had a six pack. I don't have one anymore, but it's coming back. That's because I can walk more than just a 6x8 cell now. Even this living room, which is a pretty tiny living room, is twice the size of my jail or my prison cell. Meanwhile, I was in prison without being convicted of a felony. I wasn't even convicted of a misdemeanor. I wasn't even charged with felonies. I was charged with misdemeanors. I was never allowed to enter a plea. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of women who are in the same boat. So I want you to know that this video does go both ways. But the situation that we're dealing with is that sexism is taught, racism is taught. Racism towards white people is taught, especially. But then you look at the people that all white people are being blamed for, and you realize that it's the extremes. We're having to deal with being blamed for anything that Congress passes, anything that the Senate passes, anything that the president passes, even if it's a black president, even if it's a black senator who wrote up the law that ended up being used to harm black people. All white people are apparently guilty of it. Apparently. All white people are held accountable. Most of us don't earn that magic number that men earn on average more than women. There are people like me who live well below the 40,000 something dollars that equates to. It's like $40,000 for women and $44,000 for men, or maybe it's 44,000 for women and 49,000 for men. But it's up there, you know, 40,000, 44,000, 49,000. Those are all a lot more than the $9,500 that I make per year. So obviously, blaming me because men make more money than women, I'm not. There are probably women out there that I get more money than. There are probably women out there that I make more money than. There's plenty of mothers who are stay at home mothers. There are plenty of fathers who are stay at home fathers. They don't get paid. In a way, they do, but monetarily, no. Perks aren't the same as getting paid. The fact is that I had to deal with all of this abuse because my abusers wanted to use the term mentally ill so that they could get away with the crimes that they committed. And everyone in America knows they can do this. Anybody in America who wants to pretend that it's not true is pretending. You have no idea how many men and women are raped every year whose predators get away with what they did by calling those people mentally ill. If you are raped by your dad and you end up with PTSD from being raped by your dad, Well, now he can call you mentally ill. And because you have been called mentally ill, it automatically discredits you. And because you are discredited, you must be guilty no matter what, because nobody cares what you have to say, because you've been discredited because you were called mentally ill. These things are going both ways. Just hurt feelings. See, that's the thing. When I left Virginia, it was just hurt feelings. When I left Chesapeake in specific, it was just hurt feelings. When Maddie Boa got a hold of me, then it was beyond just hurt feelings, it was harassment. It was slander and libel resulting in harm against a disabled person. And later on, it became slander and libel resulting in death. Natalie Bollinger wasn't the only person who was killed over this. Natalie is not the only person who is dead because I was not heard. I spoke out about Waylon Lolatai before he assaulted 6 other people in Boulder County, and after he had already been kicked out of another county as an officer because he had assaulted an inmate. We could have prevented 6 people from being assaulted by Waylon Lolatai by listening to me when he assaulted me, because I was the first. Out of those 7 people that he assaulted in 2018, I was the first one he assaulted at the very beginning of January. Because they assumed that I killed Natalie Bollinger and were sure that they could get away with it, especially after all of the slander that they had put out. When I tried to tell on Waylon Lolatai, I was sent to Clearview Behavioral Health, where they kept me longer than they should have, denied me the right to call law enforcement or make a police report. Boulder County shipped me to Clearview because it was in a different county, at a jurisdiction, and it prevented me from turning them in. Then at Clearview, being held for longer than I should have so they could collect the money, being injected with dangerous drugs and being assaulted, and I told on them. A year later, they killed Tibor Hatay. They were in trouble for keeping a lot of people longer than they should have. They had been in trouble for injecting people with drugs that were dangerous and were known to be dangerous. All of the things that I spoke out about. And then they killed Tibor Hatay doing exactly the things I had spoken out about. They killed a man. If people had listened to me when I spoke up over a year earlier, Tibor Hatay would still be alive. Then there was several officers who assaulted me, who killed a man named Demetrius Shankling. I was prevented from turning in those officers because I was incarcerated. I was incarcerated because I literally had gotten to the point where I had to commit a crime to try to get a day in court. And my crime didn't hurt anyone. I admitted to the crime, but I was still denied the right to face my accusers. I was denied the right to take Natalie Bollinger to court. Sorry, Alicia Bollinger to court. And both of her stepmothers, and Kara Johnson Miles. And of course, Waylon Lolatai. Now, because I was illegally prevented from turning in those officers, they killed Demetrius Shankling. They're sitting in prison for manslaughter because they killed Demetrius Shankling. And his life could have been saved by listening to me, but I wasn't heard. Because officers wanted to abuse the law and abuse their power to prevent me from having any of my constitutional rights. I threatened people back. And that's what a lot of folks want to ignore. The fact that with all of these threats and assaults against me that nobody would do anything about, and I'm the one who's treated like he's threatening to kill people and treated like he's the one who's getting violent with people. And I hadn't. To this day, there is only one Bollinger who I have threatened. And that was only if anything happened to Alicia Bollinger or Danica Garner or her children or Rochelle Campbell or her children or Rose Kelly or her children. That's because Ted Bollinger is a bad man. Rochelle Campbell admitted that to me. Rose, that's Natalie's real mother, admitted that to me. Natalie admitted it. Alicia admitted it. And several of Natalie and Alicia's friends have admitted to it, and I have recorded those conversations. And I've put them here on YouTube. Now, after this Fred Turner guy wrote, "Here is a lot of evidence against you and Natalie's case. Some are your own Facebook messages to her, as you wanted to blow your bee right out in front of her. Then you wanted her to suffer as much as you did. You weren't all the victim there, bud. No one speaks out because there is no crime, just hurt feelings. You're the boy who cried wolf." What I replied is, "And the mentality you have shows the mentality I have to deal with. I have already proven that I was the one stalked, not Natalie. I proved that she lied about nearly everything she claimed about me, and I proved that the narrative sold to the public is not the truth. I have also proven that Natalie asked me to do the things she later used to claim I was stalking her, and many of my other predators have proven I told the truth about them." And they did. Waylon Lolatai assaulting 6 more people in 2018 showed his pattern of violence. It helps to prove that I was not the first person that he assaulted or the last, that this is a repeated pattern from him. Same thing with Clearview. They proved that the things that they did to me that I spoke out about are a repeated pattern from them. Anyway, let's get back to reading. Let's see. I proved that she lied about nearly everything she claimed about me, and I've proved that the narrative sold to the public is not the truth. I have also proven that Natalie asked me to do the things she later used to claim I was stalking her, and many of my other predators have proven I told the truth about them. The fact that the courts, media, and many internet predators did all in their power to prevent me from showing the truth, facing my accusers, showing evidence, or even being allowed to show up at my own court dates. Your excuses are BS. There were and are many crimes against me. Natalie cried wolf, but I get the punishment because of my gender. If it was just hurt feelings, I wouldn't have to fight so hard to get help stopping the physical, mental, judicial, and financial abuse. We need to stop selling this narrative that only women can be victims. We need to stop selling this narrative that only black people can be victims. Both of those are false narratives and misleading narratives. And that's the biggest problem that I have with BLM and many of these women's so called liberations. There's nothing liberating about it. You're straight up being sexist and straight up being racist. And it's not okay. By selling a false narrative, you're being sexist and racist. By selling a narrative that is based on bias, you are showing what hypocrites you are. I admit that I'm a hypocrite. I may not have done these things to these people, but in some of these cases, I did those things back. After being told that there is nothing wrong with them doing it to me, I am told that it is wrong for me to do it back. People say two wrongs don't make a right. Well, excuse me, but it was magically right when they did it. It's only wrong if I do it. So how is it two wrongs? If it was equality, then the things that they were doing, threatening my life, is threatening my life wrong? Because if it's wrong, then yes, it's wrong for me to threaten them back. Now, there was only one Bollinger I threatened. However, I did threaten the other people who threatened me. I did it publicly, made a big show of it, so that it was here to be seen, so that it was not hidden. Many of these people harassed me through Facebook Messenger or through other means, not public means. When I tried to show what they were doing in public, like many of the threats that I was receiving on Facebook, I tried to show them publicly and I got 30-day bans for them. People said, well, why don't you just delete it? Why don't you just block them? Here's the thing. I have to deal with the mentality that I have to deal with those people on the internet. I have to deal with people in real life with that mentality. When people are threatening to kill me, it is against the law for them to do that. If I complain about it, then Facebook erases it. And then I have no evidence of it. So I have to be worried about complaining about this stuff because I still need to be allowed to show this evidence. People think it magically goes away. People think that magically, somehow, even though this has destroyed my friendships, it's destroyed my safety, it's destroyed my finances, it's destroyed every aspect of my life. But people want to pretend that that's not it. People want to pretend that it didn't destroy every aspect of my life. People wanted to pretend that I was not victimized, that there were no crimes against me, and that I just had hurt feelings. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I can handle the physical pain a lot more than I can handle the emotional bullshit that I've gone through. But at the same time, nobody cares about the harassment that I've had to go through. They might actually care about the assaults that I had to go through because nobody would fucking listen to me. Natalie Bollinger didn't care. She thought her little white lie was okay. She didn't stop to consider the abuse that an innocent man has had to deal with. She didn't stop to think about that. But then again, the things that I said about her that she claimed were slander turned out to be true. I exposed her for being a drug addict, and she didn't like it. I exposed her dad with her email, and she didn't like it. But those things were true. The email that she sent me, I still have. Instead of copying and pasting, I forward it to people so they can see that it did get sent to me by Natalie Bollinger in 2016 from her email address. It's a tough fight. You know, it's kind of like hospital staff automatically believing whatever the fuck the cops tell them, making bad decisions because cops told them something that wasn't true. But it's magically okay, isn't it? It's okay for them to do those things to me because who's going to stop them? I can't. I'm not allowed. I was threatened and stalked and assaulted by Robert Warnick on multiple occasions. And I was the one who got arrested. Meanwhile, there's evidence that Robert Warnick committed these crimes. Meanwhile, the things that I was locked up for didn't happen. He outright lied, just like Scott DaCosta, just like Leslie Snell, just like William Barr. And then they had to drop the charges because these things never happened. There is no proof of any of these things. Kind of like Natalie Bollinger and her sister. The evidence and correspondence between Natalie and I before, during, and after Virginia show that I was the one telling the truth. Me, not her. They show that I was the one being abused, not her. They show that I was the one asking her to put a stop to this abuse. And she just wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. She wanted to pretend that Tim Beeson, who had abused her repeatedly, who had been having sex with her since she was a little girl, legally, according to the state of Colorado, since he was having sex with her since she was 14 years old, legally, according to the state of Nebraska, he's a rapist. But it's fine, isn't it? He gets no consequences. But I get treated like a child molester for things that never happened. Natalie admitted that we didn't date. She admitted that we didn't have a sexual relationship. But people keep on going back to that. I was victimized and still am victimized because Natalie Bollinger and her junkie friends wanted to cry wolf. I said that Natalie Bollinger was on heroin, and what did her toxicology report show? She was on heroin. She had a lethal amount of heroin in her system when Joseph Michael Lopez shot her in the head. Imagine that. None of these web sleuth sites are interested in my side. It's not as interesting to them, apparently. In all of these situations, fact is stranger than fiction. But they are facts. And I've proved many of them right here on this fucking YouTube channel. I have proved that they are facts with evidence. I proved the situation with the hospital in Chesapeake, Virginia in 2016 with my hospital records right on this YouTube channel. But people still victimize me because I'm a male, and they make all these excuses to abuse me based on what other people did. People treat me like I'm going to be a serial killer because they want to associate me with people like Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold and David Koresh and a bunch of other fucking creepy bastards. But I spoke out about killing for years and years and years. And when I finally did actually threaten people, I did so, number one, only to those who had threatened and harmed me. All right? These people actually had to threaten my life or physically harm me, or I didn't threaten them. When I did threaten them, it was loud and proud on both Facebook and YouTube. And I did that specifically so that I could force a court date. If people threaten my life, I could post up thousands of screenshots of threats against my life and nobody was going to do a goddamn thing. But if I threatened those very same people back, people who are sending me pictures of knives and guns and saying they're going to come and get me in my sleep, or they know where I sleep, or they know where my sister lives, or creepy shit like that, and they're allowed to get away with it. And the officers tell me they can't do anything because it's out of their jurisdiction, even if it's in their jurisdiction. Meanwhile, jurisdiction didn't matter for any of my stuff. See, let me tell you something about the situation with Natalie Bollinger. First of all, none of these supposed crimes, none of them were committed in Adams County, which is where the protection order was from. None of them were committed or could have been committed from Boulder, which is where I was served the papers. Meanwhile, the stuff in those was complete bullshit. Then there's the fact that you only have 7 days, all right? You have to have it in. If you can't make it to court, you have to have it in writing to that department 7 days before your court date. There was no possible way for me to do that. Even if I had had the money, there wasn't enough time. And then there's the fact that my court was on the 22nd of December. I didn't even know I had court the 22nd of December. And I didn't get paid until the 23rd of December. That was in 2017, of course. As we all know, a week after that, Natalie Bollinger got shot in the head by Joseph Michael Lopez with her boyfriend's 9mm Glock at 6 to 15 inches away from her head while she was on her knees at McIntosh Dairy outside of Thornton, Colorado, just 5 blocks from Kayla Trujillo's house, which is where I went to try to get help. Get help getting a lawyer so I could defend myself against people like Natalie Bollinger, Maddie Boa, her customers, and Tim Beeson. That is specifically what I went to that house for. That is specifically what I went to Miss Peaches with help for. That's Kayla Trujillo. We call her Peaches. Now, I was getting ready to cook dinner on the 28th. And after dinner, Miss Peaches was going to help me out, trying to get a lawyer and going through evidence and trying to get this stuff to stop. I'd already been through Region 1 here in Nebraska that was supposed to help with that, and Nicole Peralta, who was supposed to help with that. But as soon as Tamara quit working at Region 1, I was pretty much left by myself with nobody who knew what the hell was going on. I was told that I had to go to the Front Range for help. Jeff Ritter from the Colorado Coalition of the Homeless was going to help me. The reason I was at Miss Peach's house is because I really needed help, and Jeff Ritter wasn't going to be able to help me until after New Year's. He was going to be on vacation and busy until after New Year's. Natalie Bollinger got shot in the head before New Year's. And after that, well, Jeff Ritter wasn't going to come forward. He wasn't going to talk to me. He was going to pretend that I didn't exist. Now, he's probably the one dude that I told the most about the situation with Natalie. He knew that I was trying to get court dates going. He knew that I needed a lawyer. We had been speaking about it for months. And then there was a situation with Ken Wilson and Leah Plunkett, who had stolen all of my disability money on false pretenses. And somehow it's magically okay. Somehow magically, Natalie getting shot in the head by somebody else makes it okay that all of these predators took advantage of me in the way that they did. I'm an at-risk adult because of the desperate situations that I am repeatedly forced into because I'm not good looking, because I'm not rich, because I don't have support, because I'm a male, because I'm white. I got to deal with the stigmas of the fact that people assume. They don't bother to look at facts. They want to assume. Once they find a scapegoat, they don't want to let that scapegoat go. They like having someone they can take things out on when they have a bad day. I wonder how many of these people that got a hold of me to threaten my life and threaten to kill my family, I wonder how many of them have decent lives. I wonder how many of them are so pathetic that this is their entire life. They don't have to work. They live at their mom's house. Or they got rich parents like Trump that give them $1 million loan, perhaps. You never know. But I am a victim of domestic assault and a survivor of it. I am a victim of sexual assault and a survivor of it. I am a victim of police brutality and corrupt courts. I am victimized most easily by calling me mentally ill and loosely associating it with schizophrenia. Police officers repeatedly told hospital staff that I was schizophrenic. You look at all the mentions of schizophrenia, they all came from officers. They're all in situations where there was no psychiatrist or psychologist to diagnose me as schizophrenic. When a police officer takes you to the hospital, he tells you that when you get there, you're going to be able to make a police report. But then you get there, and he tells a nurse that you're schizophrenic. She assumes that the officer is telling the truth, and she doesn't hear a word that you have to say. She's too busy treating you like you're schizophrenic. She should have gotten a psychiatrist or a psychologist instead of just believing blindly because this person has a badge. Literally, the predators that I was trying to turn in, the predators themselves were the ones who took me to the hospital. I try to turn them in, they take me to the hospital. How screwed up is that? It's not okay. You get to see a lot how repeatedly the officers I was trying to turn in were the ones who were allowed to do the quote unquote investigating. Amanda Jonas committed felonies, and then she was the one who was assigned to investigate those felonies. Scott DaCosta committed felonies, and when I tried to turn him in, the state patrol and the FBI both told me I had to turn it into the sheriff's department. How fucked up is that? When Officer Schneider in Washington State broke the law, and I tried to turn him in, they were supposed to transfer me to internal affairs. Instead, they transferred me to Officer Schneider. Meanwhile, those conversations are here on my YouTube channel as well. I'm not just telling these stories. I've shown the evidence repeatedly on my YouTube channel. It's still up for everyone to see. There's a few of the videos that have been taken down, and it's sad because they're full of important evidence. And at the time, the very beginning, the algorithms here on YouTube made it so that when people complained like that, they destroyed the video, so I can't get them back. But later they changed their algorithms. So now when people make complaints like that, it doesn't destroy the video. They send me a notification saying that I'm the only person who's allowed to see it. Well, that's fine, as long as I can take my computer to show people what's going on. If I can see it, then I can click on it with someone sitting right next to me in this room, and that person will have access to it. They'll be able to hear it. They'll be able to hear the things that are going on. I know this is a long video and people probably aren't going to watch it all the way through. Most of you won't make it through the first 5 minutes. But if anyone does make it all the way to the end, I want to thank you. I know that it's not easy to listen to somebody for this long, especially when it's not necessarily that interesting to you, especially when I say things that are not popular. But I want to tell you something. If there's something on my Facebook or on my YouTube that you want to assume is racist or sexist, I want you to keep in mind that those are all retaliation for racism and sexism. When people single out a group, I speak out for that group. When I get a whole bunch of stuff saying how horrible that men are with a list of this, and this, I'll make that same list for women. Does that mean that I agree with it? No, it doesn't. I'm not doing it to try to make you feel like shit. I'm doing it because maybe you will realize the hypocrisy in you. Maybe you will realize the things that you are doing to men are not okay. If I do them to you, they're not right, are they? You don't like it when I do it to you, but it's okay for you to do it to me, isn't it? That's not equality. What I am fighting for is actual equality, where if it's wrong for a man, it's wrong for a woman as well. Where it's wrong for a white man, it is also wrong for a black man, and vice versa. Wrong is wrong, regardless of your skin color, but defending yourself is never wrong. It is wrong to go murder your neighbor, but it is not wrong if your neighbor breaks into your house and is shooting at you. It is not wrong for you to shoot him to prevent him from killing you or your family. There is a big difference. Sorry. There is a big difference between murder and self-defense. There is a big difference between assault and self-defense. It's horrible that here in the United States, it's okay for a woman to defend herself, but a man's not allowed to. We get told how men shouldn't be allowed to defend themselves because they're physically stronger than women. You know what? Most of the women that I know are stronger than me. Most of them. So you can go ahead and give me that BS. But the fact is that just because there are men who are stronger than women, there are men who are much stronger than the average woman. There are women who are much stronger than the average man. I'm not stronger than the average woman or the average man. I am an exception to that rule, but you want to ignore the fact that I am not a big muscle-bound idiot. You want to pretend all of this stuff that is obviously not true in my situation. Okay, so there's a man who can bench press 3 of you. That's great. That's great that you can use that, isn't it? But you can't use that on me because I'm not able to bench 250 pounds or 350 pounds or 450 pounds. I probably could not bench press 50 pounds right now. I am not as strong as the national average. I'm not as tall as the national average. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that's sexist and two-faced. Remember I was talking about my six-pack, my abdomen, how it's okay to stare at my abs, but it's not okay to stare at a woman's chest? Well, I think it's just as wrong to stare at my abdomen like that. There's a lot of situations like that that are completely superficial. You got no idea how many women I see posting up about how they couldn't date no short man. They couldn't date a dude with a little penis. Women body shame men every single day on my timeline. Every single day. Many of them men bashing, body shaming over and over and over again. But if a man body shames a woman, it's wrong. It's somehow magically wrong. If a man says, oh, well, I don't want to have sex with her, her vagina's too loose, that's body shaming. And people make a big deal if a man says something like that. He's a horrible person for saying it. But it's okay for a woman to make fun of a man for the size of his penis, isn't it? Oh, well, it's too small to satisfy me. It's okay to say that a man has a penis that's too small to satisfy you, but it's not okay for a man to say that your vagina doesn't satisfy him for whatever reason. And like I said over and over again in a lot of my videos, this is not okay. This is not equality. Men have to take responsibility for everything that they do. And then we are expected to take responsibility for things that women do. We're expected to take responsibility for what other men have done. We are expected to take abuse for what other men have done. A woman is allowed to be traumatized by her experiences with men to the point that it is socially acceptable for her to be cruel and hateful to all men. But the same is not true the other way around. Our social bias are completely sexist. Our system is set up to victimize the victim, and that is as simple as it is. Obviously, it's not simple. Y'all be safe, stay out of trouble, or don't get caught. And remember, if you try to turn in a police officer, you need somebody, first of all, you need to record it. Second of all, you have to have someone go in with you. Otherwise, you risk the things that have happened to me happening to you.